You can say what you want. This episode hasn't started yet.
No, this will be in the episode, I guarantee you.
Well, hello and welcome to Polity Matters. My name is Scott Edberg. I am joined here with my co-host Jared Nelson. Ben Ratliff is not with us this morning. Or afternoon. I don't know where he is, but he has tasked this Polity Matters episode to me, and so it is what it is. We do have one additional guest with us, though. Thomas Rickard is with us, and I'm going to let you introduce yourself and perhaps introduce our topic after you're done with that. Can you do that, Thomas?
Sure. Just throw me into the host seat just because you don't want to do it, I guess. But yeah, I'm
exactly
Thomas.
Right.
Yeah, I'm Thomas Rickard. I am a husband of one wife, Sarah, and we have four beautiful children, Stella, Calvin, Nora, and Elizabeth. And I serve as pastor of Seven Springs Presbyterian Church, an old rural PCUS church that came into the PCA in the 1970s. And so that's where I currently serve, but also outside of my pastoral duties as a churchman, I serve as clerk of Westminster Presbytery. And then I also serve as the secretary of everyone's favorite committee of the General Assembly, Review of Presbytery Records. And we're known for many things, upsetting people, but majority for taking up a large part of time at General Assembly, but also our super long report, normally about 200 pages. And so I serve there of RPR. And so that's what we'll be talking about today. And see how many people are committed to real Presbyterian polity.
And can you perhaps, what is the scope of the work of the Review of Presbytery Records? Could we maybe start there?
Yeah. So RPR is really found in BCO chapter 40. And I think you've had another podcast dealing with that. But BCO 40 really deals with review and control. So a part of Presbyterian polity is not merely that you're ruled by elders, but there's also checks and balances. And checks and balances come in the form of appeals and complaints going up to higher courts, but also through review, that minutes of presbytery, minutes of session are sent to the next higher court where they're reviewed. And so there's a sense of accountability, not just with what complaints and appeals that are sent up, but also by other elders reviewing minutes to be able to check that they're in conformity with Scripture and also our BCO. So RPR, the Committee of Review of Presbytery Records, is the Committee of General Assembly, and they review all the presbyteries' minutes of 87 presbyteries. And so this year we reviewed over 400 sets of minutes that are sent in to General Assembly, and then we meet together. They're prepared by read teams, and then we meet together and go through and prepare that report where we deal with exceptions of form and substance with the minutes. So that's kind of what we carry out in that review and control, and we're looking for those requirements that are set in BCO Chapter 40, which is whether the proceedings have been recorded correctly, whether they've been in accordance with the Constitution, even if they're wise, equitable, and suited to promote the welfare of the church, and any lawful injunctions are followed by the higher courts. So we review all of those minutes for that. We prepare a report, and what goes to General Assembly is a report dealing mainly with the minutes that are approved, the minutes that are approved with the exceptions of form, and minutes that are approved with exceptions of substance. And so the difference between form and substance varies. We're given a list in REO 16.6, and Chapter 16 deals with Review of Presbytery Records. And 16.6 explains what an exception of substance is, that it's an apparent violation of either Constitution or Scripture and other things that are dealt with by the General Assembly. Exceptions of form generally deal with violations of how we're to keep minutes. And so they vary depending on the committee. But, one might be that it's constitutionally required that a meeting is opened and closed in prayer. And so that might not be recorded. And so that would be an exception of form, that the meeting was not opened and closed in prayer. But there's more significant things that we need to be able to deal with, and they're exceptions of substance. and they're sent to the Presbytery by General Assembly, who then cite them, and they're to the presbyteries to give a response to that exception of substance. So they can come in multiple forms, but one common one is exceptions of substance dealing with the list of examinations, and for any type of candidates for ministry, licensure, ordination, transfers, we're required to be able to do certain things in our BCO, examine them in certain areas, ask about their stated differences, rule on those stated differences. And if a presbytery doesn't record those in their minutes, then they need to be able to say why they didn't. Often it's just they didn't record it. They did it, they just didn't record it. But
yeah, so the timeline for RPR's work, it basically starts, what is it, March every year, where the presbyteries have to give and submit their minutes from the prior year. And then for the next couple of months or so, you have read teams reading through those minutes and making recommendations to the whole committee. And then those, after adopted by the committee, go before the whole assembly. And the assembly usually has a nice go of it by trying to amend your work on the floor without any context. And then whatever's approved or is still standing gets sent back to the presbyteries for further review, particularly the issues of substance, to give response when they submit their minutes again for the next year.
I just want to note that since I can try to have a contribution of substance, there's
contribution of substance.
There is a possibility that the presbytery has no issues, such as maybe like the Presbytery of the Ascension last year, and have nothing to correct. Is that correct?
Yes. So it is
I just want to be clear on that.
It's a hard timeline to follow because, we kind of our presbytery meets 3 times a year, others meet 4 or 5, maybe, just generally about the time. Some only meet twice. But you can meet in January, February of 2025. Those minutes are then compiled and sent through the AC the following year, 2026, in March 15th. That's the deadline that they should be at the AC office. Then from March 15th until we meet at the end of May, they're sent to read teams. So 3 members of Review of Presbytery Records look over that, and they prepare a draft report, kind of like a mini RPR report. And then, so they do that, and then we meet together over a period of 2.5 days. Our meeting is, we spend about 25 hours in the meeting discussing the whole report, going through it line by line, basically, and then preparing that for the General Assembly. It then goes to General Assembly in June. So the minutes of this year will go in June 2026. They're cited for exceptions of substance. They're sent to presbyteries to respond through the AC. And AC's there to respond. And so your minutes from 2025, if you have an exception of substance, might not be dealt with until the General Assembly of 2027. But you can also have another cycle where a response is unsatisfactory and it gets sent back and forth. So the hard thing is that we're dealing with multiple levels of this timeline. And so it really can be a lengthy process keeping up with all of those exceptions.
Yeah, we're still dealing with in Ileana an issue from 2023, and I'm kicking myself because I used the word received instead of approved. And if I would have just used the word approved, it would have probably, no one would have batted an eye, and it would have been satisfactory. But you need to do more than receive, RPR says. And so maybe this year we'll get that issue resolved. Who knows? When thinking about, did you have something, Thomas?
Yeah, I just think moving forward, dealing with what we're doing now is kind of after GA. So GA has approved it. People say, well, RPR cited us for this. Well, RPR didn't cite you for that. GA did. It's a committee of Review of Presbytery Records, not a commission. And so the General Assembly cited a presbytery for an exception of substance. Now, what's helpful to be able to understand about that is it's an apparent violation. What we see here, even in RPR's process, are clear principles of Presbyterian polity in that you're innocent until proven guilty. And so Presbytery is innocent and there's an apparent violation. We see something. And so it's not a judicial action where you have failed in your minutes. In a sense, the General Assembly is saying that you're guilty of that. It's an apparent violation. So now we begin the process, you might say, of kind of Matthew 18, where General Assembly goes to Presbytery and says, we see this apparent violation. And Presbytery gets a chance to respond. They can say, yes, we didn't do that. We're guilty of that. Or Presbytery has the chance to be able to respond and say, no, we disagree. And so that can create a bit of back and forth, but it's helpful for us to be able to understand that as RPR General Assembly kind of gives these exceptions of substance, that it's not judicial in the sense it's only through the SJC that anything judicial can happen. So RPR can go back and forth, and generally we've got a limit of about 3 years. After 3 years, then we can send it to SJC. Sometimes it's a little bit less if there's a credible report of an important delinquency or something that's grossly unconstitutional, then that can be submitted to the SJC directly per 40-5. And so we need to be able to understand that. And the other thing that's helpful is to be able to understand that what the committee prepares and the General Assembly approves, there's no precedent. So just because General Assembly cites a presbytery 1 year doesn't mean that there's a precedent for that to happen in the future. And so that can be a helpful thing for us to be able to understand as well, that we talk exceptions of substance up where it's some form of egregious sin, where it's merely just that first step of that dialogue of, in your minutes when we reviewed them, we didn't see this. And Presbytery gets a chance to respond.
Yeah, it's this year. It's kind of interesting, like the RPR debate. I'm not in RPR, but it kind of seems every General Assembly that RPR debates something, and then the people that were dissatisfied or lost in RPR then go to the floor of the assembly and try again, kind of thing, where it's like some of the same debates I'm guessing that you have in the committee then bear themselves out on the floor of the assembly. Like Ileana was pulled out of the omnibus this year, and I was thinking to myself, please don't pull us out. Like we'll take our licks. We'll do this through normal process. Like please don't embarrass us. We'll do what we're supposed to do. But sometimes it's like, well, we need to skip the dialogue and just undo what RPR did rather than even having a conversation. And it seems to be that like the assembly has different guts on different years. Like 2 years ago, you might recall that we had an images issue where the report got amended like 5 or 6 different places on exceptions of substance related to images of Christ. And then this year on Paedo Communion, it was slapped down like 5 times where it's like, no, we're going to uphold the committee. And so it's just interesting seeing how all of that works on the Presbytery or on the GA floor.
Yeah, and I mean, that's any time you put the same vote up to the same group of people, you might get a different outcome. You put it up with a different group of people, you might get a different outcome. And so RPR is always inconsistent because it depends on who serves on the committee. And then General Assembly is always inconsistent as well, as they approve the report or things get approved or disapproved. And so that's where no precedent, we should be careful to be able to say, well, when the RPR report came up, this year we didn't do it, but this year we did, because it's kind of like church history. You can go through church history and find any example you want from any era, from any person, of how things have been practiced. And you can find the plethora. That's the Baptist argument. That's the Presbyterian argument in the early church. How did they do it? Well, I've got that argument. I've got these citations and these proofs. And so, we're inconsistent. And so, I think we acknowledge that as RPR. And even in our report, if you were to go through our report in detail, you'd probably notice sometimes we cite something as an exception of substance and sometimes the exception of form. Now, sometimes that's very deliberate, that the minutes aren't the same, but other times it's not deliberate at all. It's just that we're human and we err when we prepare it.
Yeah. In thinking through, so let's get to, as I believe all the stated clerks in the PCA have received their they're slacking from the assembly. And so now clerks probably are preparing responses to issues of substance. With issues of form from the assembly, it's just a note that the clerk will do better next time personally. But what are some of the ways that a presbytery should consider in how to respond to RPR?
So just a comment on form. I encourage clerks, and clerks should send that to their whole presbytery. I think that we as clerks, they're not our minutes. We're merely the recorders of them, but presbytery approves them. So encourage them to send them to the whole presbytery. But exceptions of form, it doesn't mean that you don't need to do anything with them. General Assembly doesn't need to hear any response from it. I think that Review of Presbytery Records would probably feel better if exceptions of form, they knew something was happening with them rather than them just getting sent to their folder somewhere in the clerks, that you go through and review what you didn't do and maybe amend your minutes if you failed to record something or correct your record. But yeah, exceptions of form require a response. And so as many people would say, there's an app for that. There's a section for that in our REO chapter 16. It tells you that you should approve your responses within that same calendar year. So when we're talking about 2025 minute in February, you get a citation in 2026. It's helpful for presbytery to deal with that exception of substance in the 2026 year. That's just good for record keeping and helpful for that movement. Often I think that we postpone it and push it to, it needs to be due by March, so let's do it early on, later. And but if we can approve that response early, but they submit that response, it needs to be in by March 15th. It's the same every single year, and every single year people come up and say, we didn't know the date, or, sometimes they're new clerks, but March 15th is the date. Every single year, your minutes need to be in, and same with your responses. We actually changed our standing rules in our presbytery because we meet the second Saturday in March. So, and we approve our November stated meeting at that March meeting. And so for the clerk to be able to have the minutes approved, prepared, and sent off to General Assembly, it was often, it could be 14th of March and they're due on the 15th. So we changed our standing rules so a committee can form themselves as a commission to be able to approve minutes if necessary. But when writing a response, maybe some helpful steps might be that you sit down and read and understand that response first. What are the citations that they've given in those words? Where in the BCO, what does the BCO actually require? So one example is that we used to give a citation, exception of substance, that the congregation didn't concur with the dissolution of a relationship between a pastor. And that was kind of the verbiage we used. But it was poorly worded by RPR as we sent them out. But we've changed that since that time. But it's not that a Presbyterian congregation needs to concur with the dissolution. What needs to happen at that stated meeting is the congregation needs to be able to have their voice heard by the presbytery. That there's three parties that are called to be able to call a pastor: the congregation, the pastor, and the presbytery to approve. And so when you're dissolving that relationship, those three parties should have a say as well: the pastor and the congregation, and then the presbytery approving that dissolution. And so that's what we're looking for in that situation. So understanding what that exception of substance is, and trying to fathom, looking back at your minutes, was it what's not there? We have a chance. I think we as particularly as clerks get very defensive when someone points something out in our minutes. It's you want to offend a clerk, you go tell them they've got poor minutes, and they will probably weep. But we take it very personally. But I tell my presbytery all the time several things. I'm not a bishop. I'm a secretary. I'm your clerk. And the second thing I tell them all the time is that these are your minutes. I just record and keep them. So you are approving these minutes. If there's an issue with these minutes, it's your issue. I will do all I can to make them. And so I'm very grateful. We have about 6 men in our presbytery. Once I send out our minutes, they will send me a long list of corrections, and I delight in that. And so when we get these exceptions of substance, clerk, don't take it personally. And also presbyters, other elders in your presbytery, don't just say, well, the clerk made a mistake. Like it's everyone's duty to read the minutes, to approve the minutes. And so I think that can be helpful. And so when you get an exception of substance, to be able to look and say, what is this exception of substance is? Because if you start on the wrong footing and you write a response to the wrong exception, it's not going to be satisfactory.
Where can you get perhaps advice on that? Because typically the report that the presbytery receives is basically just a one sentence kind of thing. You don't get like a rationale typically. It says one sentence with a citation and on this day of minutes, and you don't know the exact line or the exact location. You kind of have to do some sleuthing. What are some aids in helping you with that?
Yeah, so right at the very start, you find the location of the date of the minutes. And we try and write clerks, notes to clerks, which is in the clerk's report. So that's where all the exceptions are formed. And we try and be helpful in there, trying to point out where the location is. So the date of the minutes, the page is normally a reference. Not everyone uses the same numbering system. But the best thing to do is read the BCO reference. What does the BCO then require you to do? And so once you read that BCO reference, then look at your minutes and say, if I was an outsider, I wasn't at the meeting, I wasn't there at all, I have no idea of the context, I don't know what the common practice is of your presbytery, does the minutes show that we did what we're supposed to do? And if the answer is yes, then maybe then read the response and kind of, maybe they made a mistake. Again, we sometimes find it that we'll cite an exception of substance. Say, for example, we have you have a candidate coming for licensure and then ordination, and that's separated by a calendar year ending. So you have a licensure exam in 2025 in November, and then you have an ordination exam in 2026 in March, your meeting. We don't get your previous minutes. We're only looking at 2026 when we're reviewing those minutes. And so you might our presbytery has the same examination for licensure as it does for ordination. And so we just add the additional examinations. We've already asked them their stated difference. We asked them if they've changed their opinion, but we've already done that in our November meeting. But if you're just coming to your March meeting, we don't get to see that information when we're reviewing just 1 year. So it might be that information is recorded, but it's not recorded in that specific location. Another example is licensure. You need to hear the person preach. Well, that happens, and you have them preach in the morning of your exam, but the exam's not until after lunch. And so did presbytery approve that sermon? It needs to be recorded in the minutes, but there might be some things, but yeah. And then I think just familiarity, if you do find something that you're unsure about, you can reach out to anyone on RPR, and most of them, there are common exceptions. Most of them about, I would say 95% of them are very regular, ordinary exceptions. So if you give a citation, most RPR guys would be able to say, this is what we normally mean. Is that what's in your minutes? But doing that little bit of research, because if you start, again, that year cycle, if you start with your response and don't understand it, and it might be that it's unclear. We're trying to get better at making it very clear of what we're stating. But if it's, if you don't understand it, you're going to answer the wrong question. And so, reading comprehension and trying to fathom what that exception actually is can be quite helpful in preparing your response.
And so how can you respond? What are some ways you can respond to RPR?
Yeah, so once you've understood what that response is, the second step is to go and read RAO 16-10, Section B. And in there it spells out how a presbytery is to be able to respond to General Assembly and their exceptions. And so really there's two options. You can either agree with the exception or disagree. This is kind of the guilty innocent. Are you pleading your innocence, or you're agreeing with the citation given? So if you agree, again, sit down and read the response, understand it, and then choose which path you're on. Sometimes we talk about it with our kids all the time. They'll say, "I'm sorry, but," they did something else. And so sometimes you'll hear, "We agree, but," and then they're actually disagreeing. So choose which lane you're going to go in and agree and disagree with the citation, the exception of substance. And so when you agree, there's three major portions to it. The first one is you agree with the exception. The second one is you correct your record or the action, if possible. We'll come back to that. And the third one is that you promise to be more careful in the future. And so this is kind of, again, a famous Rickard catechism question that gets quoted all the time. What must you do with your sin? You must be sorry for your sin, but you also must hate and forsake it. And so that's what we must do as well. It's not merely just saying, sorry, you're not going to do it, but you're not going to do it again. But the key the RPR and General Assembly is looking for is that middle section, to be able to correct your record if possible and correct your action if possible. So if your citation says no record of 6-month membership of a candidate coming under care, then you need to record that there was a 6-month membership. You need to record somewhere that you reviewed the session endorsement, not just saying, sorry, we won't do it again. There needs to be some form of record in your minutes of that you've recorded how they were. Were they a member of a PCA for 6 months? Maybe they weren't, and then you can use the extraordinary clause. Mm-hmm. Or if there's an action, if you did something that was unconstitutional, and if it is possible, then you should try and amend and correct that action. And so when we come back to unsatisfactory responses, about 53% of unsatisfactory responses is that first one, that they don't correct their record. So they don't tell us in their response and correct their minutes what they actually didn't do in the first place, or they didn't record in the first place. And about 13% is they don't correct their action. About 6% of those unsatisfactory responses is that they don't submit something that should have been submitted, like minutes of commission minutes or other attachments that should be there. And so that's how you agree with, so those three steps. You agree that you have corrected your record, corrected your actions. Jacob Gerber has a great article on Presbyterian polity of how you're to correct your record. You can do it the difficult way through Robert's rules and adopt something, amend something previously adopted. And you're allowed to do that. And if you give notice of those type of things, the majority vote decreases. But if you don't, then you got to have certain number. It can be complicated, but it's not that difficult. Or you can follow Jacob's recommendation and kind of record it in your minutes later in your meeting, and then make a notation in your original minutes. We dealt with this again, or we corrected this at this further meeting. So when you're reading those minutes, you go back and you can see that. The second way to be able to write a response is if you disagree. And so RPR, General Assembly can be wrong.
Before we get to the disagreeing, I think it's helpful to note that when you're correcting something previously adopted, you're not changing the minutes from that prior meeting, but as you said with Jacob, you're just making a notation there, and you're recording the action in the present meeting, not changing the minutes of a prior meeting. That's right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So you can go through that process.
You don't have to fiddle with older minutes where you're like, okay, now I need to go find the Word document from 5 years ago and change it. No, you don't need to do that. You're making the correction in the meeting today. You're recording it in that meeting, not a prior meeting.
Yeah. And so when you do that, again, you got to be careful about going back and tampering with old minutes. And with Word documents, it's very easy to do that. So that's why it's really important to have something like a print set of minutes to be the official set of minutes. And so a handwritten notation in the sidelines of that minutes is more than enough to be able to say, go see this other meeting where we fix this fix this error, or we added aspects to it. So yeah, it can appear complicated, but I think we normally just make it a little bit more complicated than it needs to be.
Yeah.
And
what do you do when you disagree?
When you disagree, again, it's an apparent violation. So you might have a different interpretation of the BCO. You might have a disagreement with how it was worded, or it could be that you did actually record it. Sometimes they're the responses. If you look at minutes on page 4, line 45, it clearly says that we did record this. Again, 3 steps. The first step is that you respectfully disagree. I don't think we've ever ruled someone out of order or unsatisfactory because they didn't do it respectfully. But here you're dealing with General Assembly. So doing it with respect is helpful. So you state where your position is, agree or disagree. And then you state your grounds. Why is it that you, in your minutes, were valid? We did record it. We have a different interpretation. And then it's referred back to the General Assembly to be able to deal with. So there's not that correction of record because there was no error, but you get to be able to state your ground. You get to be able to make your case. So make that clear. Again, that starting point of what the exception was. Our hearts often will go, we disagree. I think that's just our bent, particularly as clerks. If clerks are writing this, we take things very personally. And so we disagree that our minutes were well and respectable and everyone else is wrong. But, it's everyone's right. And I encourage them to do that, to respectfully disagree. And we frequently will have a response where Presbytery responds and the next General Assembly says that's satisfactory. They've made their case. They did it very clearly, articulated it well. It's always a delight to see.
Yeah, I have a different approach as a clerk. I just want RPR to leave me alone. And so I acquiesce. I'm like, okay, I've screwed up. I'll do whatever you want. Please leave me alone. I'm like the federalism. Stay away from me.
Yeah. So I mean that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I won't do this again. Please don't call back.
Is there any tips to send chocolates or other items when you send your minutes into RPR to make them treat them better?
I don't know of any. For a long time, Paul Lee was on there, and so he would love. Everyone that knows Paul Lee knows his love for is it Coke Zero, and his piles of cans. And I don't know where those are funded from, but
it couldn't hurt.
Hey, I mean, old Reformed books. I don't know of any bribery that's been taking place, but
I'll send you a directory.
I'm sure there's ways to soften a Reformed Presbyterian's heart. Yeah.
Oh man. What are the most common exceptions that you typically see?
Yeah, so we used to give in our first preliminary report, no one reads the whole report, obviously, but we used to give up to, 20, 22 examples that we think that clerks should look at. Last year we did 10, and this year we're just giving 8. Mm-hmm. If clerks look at that first portion of that report, those common exceptions, those 8 things, make up about 80% of our report, 60% of our report. So the simple way to be able to get RPR off your back is just record your minutes correctly. Yeah, that's the simple way. And often they're not major disagreements. Obviously, we see some where General Assembly takes an exception of substance of something that's of a significant matter. Mm-hmm. But we often, this year we had about 515 previous exceptions that needed a response. And only about just under 100 were unsatisfactory, and often they were unsatisfactory about 75% for those 3 categories: that they didn't correct their record, they didn't correct their action, or they didn't submit minutes that needed to be submitted. So 75 of those unsatisfactory. So, you're dealing with about 25 exceptions of substance that are, deal with something of significant value. A lot of the other times it's just we didn't record it, we've corrected it, we've moved on. And so those small things, it's hard to be able to get the exact numbers, but 8 things that clerks should do. They should go to the start of the RPR report, look at those 8 things, print them out. After finishing their minutes, go through 8 of those things. Did we do any of these 8 things? And did we fulfill what we needed to do? Elders do the same thing. When the clerk sends out your minutes, look over them. Do we call someone as a pastor? Do we follow all the steps? And that's 60%, at least 60% of our report. So the 8 things are things dealing with call-related exceptions. Did the congregation approve? Was the congregation done? Was it a duly called congregational meeting? That's one of the things I think RPR really does really well, is that sees their review. They're seeking to protect the rights of those who don't have a voice in those situations. And so a congregation, one of their most important rights is their right to be able to elect people to have authority over them. And so we as RPR are looking to make sure that the congregation did have a congregational meeting. It was duly called. Did they approve that person as their pastor or an assistant pastor to this session approve that? That's what we're looking for. Dissolutions, again, the congregation is often the one that's overlooked. Were they invited to the Presbytery meeting to be able to say, yes, we agree with this dissolution? Or did they say, no, we disagree? Again, Presbytery needs to be able to make that decision, but call-related exceptions. One of the major ones, incomplete ordination or any type of examination. Candidates under care, licensure, ordination, transfers, the details are not recorded. Often what it is they record that they examine them in church history, but they didn't examine them per their record in PCA church history. And so that's just a simple mistake, but just trying to correct those things. One change that we've started to do, and we will be doing this year, is that we've changed our BCO to be able to, underneath personal character, religious experience, is someone, do they have sins of notorious concern? And so we want to see that in their minutes. They examined underneath experiential religion. Did you examine them on those particular matters? And so there are things, incomplete exam, missing minutes, review of Presbytery Records gets to review every single set of minutes. That includes commission minutes, judicial commission minutes, executive session minutes. You send out a commission to ordain and install someone. That report is a report. They're the minutes of Presbytery. They need to be included in the minutes of Presbytery. And so they all need to be sent in with the minutes as well. Annual reports. So interns need to give a report every single stated meeting. And then everyone else, interns, candidates, out of bounds teaching elders, need to give a report annually. And so we look for those type of things. And that's an exception of substance. And I think a lot of times we go, well, they're just been nitpicky. But things like session endorsements and yearly intern reports, they're very important for understanding the growth of the development of someone preparing for ordination. You have a session endorse a man as a candidate. That's very important. That's his character. They're speaking to their character, that he shows the giftings, and also he seems called to the ministry. And then as he performs his internship for at least a year, 3-4 meetings, he should be given a report. What's he doing? Presbytery oversees that internship, not a church or a session. It's the Presbytery who's dealing with that. So annual reports, session records, that you're not reviewing minutes of session records or you're not following up with those things. Voting thresholds, if the BCO requires a 2/3 majority vote, a 3/4 majority vote, that needs to be recorded. 6 months membership, ministerial obligation form, or not judging stated differences in the prescribed categories. So every time we have a candidate come on, they state their differences. Everyone knows, they go, what are the 4 categories we get again? And so I turn to REO again and read out the 4 categories that he didn't state a difference, that it's merely semantic, it's more than semantic, but not out of accord of our fundamentals of our system or strikes of the vitals. And so that once someone states a different, Presbytery must record in their minutes which one of those they are. And so if you were to go through those 8 things, did we do any of those 8 things in one Presbytery meeting? That could reduce our report by 120 pages, roughly, just based on numbers. So those type of issues are the common ones that come across our desk, and often they're pretty simple to fix. If often it's just a failure that when the clerk was copying and pasting something, he forgot to paste that portion. Very rarely does the Presbytery say, no, we don't think they need to be examined in church history and PCA. Very commonly, it's just, we didn't record it.
Yeah, I'm in Ileana, we're smaller, and so we do like the same things at the same time almost every year. And so almost having like templates for some of that, if it passed pretty well last year, then don't innovate where you don't need to. We vote on BCO amendments every October, so why change how we do that? Let's just copy, paste, and add the numbers that you need to add rather than changing the system. I've created a few templates for exams as well to make sure that I don't forget PCA history. I just have a random template that I copy and paste that, okay, we make sure we hit all of them so that we don't have to deal with any issues. And so once you have templates for some of these, and especially after you fix some of them, you might have better templates that you don't have to do them again in the near future. And so I like to I have templates for examination, but I also one of the first things I started doing as clerk was I'd print out 4 copies of each checklist of every person that comes through, candidate for examining someone for candidates under care. And I'd give one to the chairman who's running the exam. I'd give one to the moderator, and I'd have one, and then I have a spare one. And that is very helpful because it's not merely that you're recording it, you want to be doing it. And so often the moderator, the chairman will be getting on a roll, they'll get familiar and they jump to something or they forget something, and the moderator will be able to say, oh, we need to come back and do this. We didn't do Bible content, or we didn't finish Bible content. And that's very helpful, because then you've got 3 people in the meeting confirming that. And then at the end, I can go back and confirm we did everything when we record our minutes and make sure that our minutes reflect what we actually did. But yeah, those checklists, the clerk download page, there's a list of checklists, and you can just print them out. They follow the BCO. It's very, very helpful. And so clerks, if you can do your work before your meeting, it saves you a lot of time. And if you can kind of think about RPR while you're writing your minutes, then I think it'll go a long way. I'm always thinking about RPR. They're the boogeyman, under my bed. How about some brief comments on 40-5 issues? So not all things are in the minutes, right? And so can you perhaps give us some comments on how a Presbytery handles that, how RPR handles 40-5 issues? And perhaps you can explain what a 40-5 issue is.
Yeah, so going back to Chapter 40, we often just deal about Chapter 40, Section 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4 are kind of not as well known, but 40-5 is that there's something that is not included in the minutes. There's a lack in the minutes, and so the higher court can go back and tell the court to be able to reconstruct, or correct or whatever. 40-5 is something that has been a little bit more frequent, and so what 40-5 is the criteria is pretty simple. That there's a credible report of something, of an important delinquency or something that is grossly unconstitutional. And so that's what a 40-5 report is. When we talk about it, it's a credible report of something that is an important delinquency or something that's grossly unconstitutional. And so a credible report doesn't mean that it's true. What it means is it's believable. And so that is a pretty low bar. Why would this person know this information? That bar is pretty low. What the bar is that 40-5 requires is it is an important delinquency or something that's grossly unconstitutional. Now, there are descriptive words, important and grossly, that have no definition in our BCO. And so trying to understand that. So we've received quite a few 40-5s through RPR, and the practice is that it goes to RPR first and then to the SJC to be able to, the latter part of 40-5 is the judicial part steps in. And so what the practice has been is it's gone to RPR. And so some of those have gone to the SJC, that they were grossly unconstitutional practices. And ultimately, it's up to the SJC to be able to decide if it was or not. So 40-5s come. The practice, again, RPR changes and there's no written rules. What we've got is the BCO Chapter 40. Generally, the practice is there a mechanism through review, complaint, or appeal that could handle this matter? And so 40-5 is a catch-all, and a good example of that is a congregation. Something happens to a congregation. A presbytery acts and something, and a member of a congregation doesn't have a right to appeal or complain against that action unless it's taken against them. And so complaint, you need to be a member of that court. And so 40-5, is it an important, grossly unconstitutional? And so that then gets sent to RPR to review. With a lot of our 40-5s, they don't rise to that standard that's set in 40-5. They're handled through review, through an exception of substance. They're handled through appeals or complaints. And so we've seen a lot more of those. I think it's in the recent years, but it's not a way to circumvent or go around the ordinary process. So encourage people to, if you're unsure, what's the direct path that we can do? Can I complain against an action? Can I appeal against this action? That's ordinarily, or is it through that review process that's ordinary that comes through it?
Yeah, it seems like the 40-5, how we're reading it now, that seems like a pretty recent innovation. Would you say so? Like within the last 3 or 4 years, it seems that it came with the Metro New York issue. But am I wrong on that?
I think it definitely been around before that. I think it's just been more common. More people know about it now, and more people move to that process. And I think that is maybe we've just clarified that. Now people go, oh, I'll just send a 40-5. And so we, RPR every year, if they get a 40-5, RPR, the current practice is RPR reviews it. And we review it with what we've got, with the credible report, with the minutes. And so, I believe it's something that has become, it's always been there, and the PCA has seen 40-5s before, but it's like more people know about it now. But encourage people.
That's a result of just the issues we have with like 31-2 and trying to assume original jurisdiction.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I could speak to why people choose this route compared to others. I think my assumption is that there are few people in the PCA that really understand the intricate process of the BCO. I think, it can be complicated, but it's somewhat simple with principles. And so I I don't know exactly. I think more people know about it. I think it's it's been spoken about now. I don't know if you went to a regular teaching elder in 25 years ago, 10 years ago, and you said BCO 40-5. They'd know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Now we even just refer to it as a 40-5. We don't even need to know the context of where it's located. We know it's got its own terminology. And
but
so
that's not, you're trying to change the nomenclature, aren't you? You're going to ruin all of this.
What am I doing? I'm probably ruining something, I'm sure. But
don't you have an overture that you want to put up that reorders the paragraphs by different standards?
Yeah. So
isn't that you?
Yeah, that's just my OCD. When you look at BCO 21.4 and then you go to chapter 14, and they're probably the longest subsections, and they're numbered differently. And so I would like, just for human uniformity, something decently in an order. This wouldn't change this at all. 40-5. 40-5 would remain. All the sections would remain. It's just all the subsections, the A, B, D, D, the Roman numeral ones.
I want to make it really complicated. I want it to be like I.B.5.V6 or something.
Start
go
using
ahead.
Greek and Hebrew letters instead.
Yeah.
Just
or what's
Section
the
Aleph you. I'm gonna Aleph you. Aleph 5 you.
Yeah. Watch out for that gimel. It'll get you.
That gimel.
Yeah.
Don't get gimmeled.
Yeah, with the numbering and things like that, and then you try and carry on the Westminsterian lack of numbers. What is it? J.
Like J.
They don't have a J and a V. So.
Is there anything else you could probably add for how we can navigate as presbyteries some of these important issues?
No, I just think just it above all, it's presbytery responding to General Assembly. It's not a clerk responding to RPR. It's a presbytery responding to General Assembly, and so RPR is trying to do a better job of being more efficient. We've moved to a more automated process in the last couple of years, and that has helped us ensure that our report is more accurate. We can follow up with exceptions better. Things don't fall through the cracks, or just human errors when we're inputting data. We can catch that and kind of see, did you actually mean the 17th instead of the 19th? And so we're trying to do better at that, and the AC office is working very hard to be able to try and make it easier for clerks to submit things, and they're doing a fantastic job. Alyssa Chow is the RPR assistant, and I work very closely with her as the secretary, and she's doing a fabulous job. She's had that role for a little under a year, and so last time was her first year, and she did fantastic. You just think about all those minutes get sent to one person, and then that one person needs to keep track of them all, and then send them out to other people, keep track of them, and follow up with everything. And she did a fabulous job. And so, RPR works hard, and we hope that we're seen as brothers, not enemies. Hopefully seen as, friends, and doing the work, that important work of review and control.
I'm sorry, Thomas. You're the IRS of the PCA, and you can't shake your reputation that easily.
Well, yeah, I personally take offense to that.
Until I'm on RPR, it's going to be very adversarial in our relation.
Yeah, I think that's a helpful thing. Is as clerks, one of the best things I've done. The clerks do a clerks conference. The AC runs a clerks conference every year. That is very valuable to be able to interact with other clerks. RPR has been the most valuable thing I've ever done as a clerk, because it gives me an intricate detail of seeing what the minutes should be like. My first time as RPR, I got physical minutes, and they mailed me a box with 4 sets of minutes, and they gave me a form, and they said, now produce a report. I talked with other people on our team. It helped me a little bit. I started reading through these minutes, and It took me a long time to read through the minutes and to prepare one report for one presbytery. Things weren't there, it took me a long time to find things, even trying to be gracious and say, okay, it's here, but not here. It's not recorded perfectly, but it's there, give them the benefit of the doubt. And then finally I came to one set of minutes and I was like, oh, this is what presbytery minutes need to look like. Like, these are exactly, there was little to no exceptions in those sets of minutes at all. And so clerks going to RPR can be a very valuable tool, just to be able to understand what people are looking for when they're reviewing those minutes. But yeah.
Well, Jared, do you have anything to add?
Nothing of substance.
Nothing of substance.
If we can have like an AI program that just clones our clerk, Jay Nykirk, apparently he's on the top 10 list. So
yeah, he does a fabulous job, and every year it's like, we go through and Ascension says no exceptions, and it was a couple of years Ascension actually got an exception of substance, and I'm guessing Jay wrote the response for that. Respectfully disagreeing, stated his grounds in 3 clear, articulate points with, 2 pages of response. And it was like, no, yeah, RPR and General Assembly made a mistake. Jay was right. And so
you can't win against Ascension. That's what I've just learned.
Nope.
Yeah.
Even when you try. So, all right. Well, it was a delight having you on, Thomas, and I know that this is helpful for me, and I hope it's helpful for guys as they go into the fall, considering their own issues of substance. There's more that we can do, and much better we can do, and I think this sort of content helps towards that. Anything else you want to say to us, Thomas?
No, I just appreciate the chance to be able to ramble on for an hour. I don't get that liberty in my own house to be able to talk about these things without getting booed off the stage, so to say. And so appreciate it.
That's why we have this podcast. None of our wives care about this stuff, and so this is actually a support group.
Yeah, well, yeah, a good affinity group for polity. So, yeah.
Well, as our wives would say, this podcast is over. You can find us in the show notes where we all are located and what we do. But until then, say goodbye, gentlemen.
Goodbye, gentlemen.
Goodbye.